It being 10:30, I'm going to officially call to order the Public Works and Highways presentation of the capital budget orientation. Welcome, Mr. Shea.
Good morning, Chris Shea from the Legislative Budget Assistance Office. Everybody should have before them a tan sleeve, and in that sleeve, you should have three documents. You should have what we have referred to as the catalog. You should have a bond offering statement, and then you'll have our presentation. On top of that, you should have the governor's recommended capital budget. Your name should be on that in the bottom corner so that you don't get confused and share it with somebody else by accident. And I'll touch up on all these documents as I go along, and I'm going to be brief because the treasurer is supposed to be here at 11 o'clock, and you don't want to listen to me for too long. So the purpose of the document that's got LBA in big letters on it and the capital budget orientation is it's basically meant to be a one-stop shop for you if you're interested in knowing different aspects. Just to start, when you flip the page, on the back side of the cover is contact information. So my name's there, my telephone number, and my email. And there's also a link, and that's to our webpage, the LBA webpage, where all the capital project documents will be located. As agencies come and present to you and we hand you a piece of paper from the agency, that paper will be stored on our webpage so that you can access that when you're not wanting to look at the paper or you don't have the paper in front of you. The next page is the table of contents. It gives you just a very brief overview of what's contained in the document. You got the capital budget statutes, the overview of the capital budget process. We throw in a docket for the capital budget for House Bill 25. There's a compare report, which our office prepares, and then the House Bill 25 is adopted. And then a couple of pieces of some minor changes that occurred this last operating capital budget that I'll just draw your attention to. So I'm not going to go through the statutes. I mean, again, that's the reason I show you that this is how or drives what happens with the capital budget. So that it tells when the process should start, what types of things should be included. It's not just administrative services. There are things like CTE from the Department of Education, and there's a statute that guides how they submit that for the capital budget and how much of that they put in there. But if I could move you to page 9 of the document, it's going to be the overview of the capital budget process. So this process starts almost a year ago. The agencies start thinking about what they would like to do for capital improvements or capital projects within their agency. And then they submit by May 1st their list to the governor's office, to administrative services for then to be developed into a compiled list of all the agencies that the governor will have for their presentations in June. So there's the capital budget presentations in June of a year. From there, and there's a summary in this document that, there was close to $700 million worth of capital projects, actually more than that, because almost 600 was the prison, of projects that the agencies asked for. It's a major wish list. It's everything they could potentially need money for. Once the governor has their hearings, they work with the Public Works Committee and some of their people to determine which projects the agencies presented should be further reviewed and submitted in the catalog. So this trims down the numbers that were presented in June. And from here, the governor may pick some of these projects to present in the pink document to you. Doesn't necessarily mean that a project that is in the pink document was in the catalog, that it's not binding in any way, but the items in the catalog have a lot more detail behind them than what you actually see in the catalog. So that Department of Administrative Services, Division of Public Works, works through these projects, works with the agencies, and comes up with cost estimates, and that's where they get some of the numbers. And sometimes the numbers that you might see that come from the catalog, and then an agency brings in something that they had done earlier than that, might be different. And that's part of the reason, is that there's some costs that Administrative Services, Public Works will try to update and try to get you to the most current information to have before you. Then by February 15th, the governor needs to hand her budget over to the legislature, and then it comes, in this case, to the House. So the pink document is the Governor Ayott's recommendation. If you pick up the pink document for just a moment and you flip the first page. So these are the agencies that have a project recommended by her. And what you have there is the total funds and then the general fund portion. In this case, the governor is recommending $143 million in general fund capital appropriations. For members of this committee who have been on this committee in the past, you've often talked about a number between 120 and 125. So just so you know, it's up a little bit from what you typically see. I suspect the treasurer will speak to you about this as well. So this committee will go through the process, recommend a capital budget to the full House. The House will accept that potentially, and if they do, it would go to the Senate, and the process would start all over again. Senate would pass a capital budget potentially. It would come back to the House to consider if they made any changes. A committee of conference may be asked for at that point, and at the committee of conference, selected members of this committee and of the Senate Capital Budget Committee would meet in a committee of conference to iron out any differences, and from there it would be passed to the governor to sign off and put into law potentially. So that's the process. Hopefully by the end of June, this is all done. Maybe. If you flip to page 11, it's gonna look like this. This is the compare sheet that I put together for this committee. So I'll take all the projects that the governor has recommended in her budget. I'll put it on the list. There'll be a column that's blank that has the House decisions. Each one of you will get, as we start to meet with agencies, I'll provide this to you. So next week, when agencies start coming in to present to you their capital project ideas and what they would like you to fund for them, you'll be able to keep tab on, what decisions this committee might make. I will update the document at the end of each meeting if any decisions are made, and at the next meeting provide the updated version, but as well it will be on our website. If you turn to page 17, that is the House Bill 25 that was signed into law in 2023. So if you were interested in what was done in the last capital budget, you have that document here. If you look on page 18, you're going to see a highlight on row 22 and 23. It's related to the Winnisquam Regional CTE Center. So what happened there is that in House Bill 2, there was language put in to say, fund this project through the Education Trust Fund, don't bond it. Because the capital budget had already moved forward, they put language in House Bill 2 that was contingency that basically said if this House Bill 25 gets adopted, don't fund it with capital appropriation, use the Education Trust Fund, pay cash. And that can be seen on page 41 and 42. You'll see again some shaded areas. That's where the CTEs were funded this last budget cycle. Again, for members who are returning, most years the CTEs are funded through the capital budget. The 2023 House Bill 25 was the first time it wasn't funded through there. It was funded directly with the Education Trust Fund appropriations. This time, if you look in the governor's recommended, the CTE is back in there. So it looks to be being asked as a capital appropriation this time. And rightly so, since the Education Trust Fund probably couldn't support additional CTE. If you turn to page 43, and then going on for the next couple pages, these would be all the requests that were made back in June at the governor's capital budget hearing. So each agency and how much they were asking for. It was $1.1 billion in general funds. So I cut that short. And the Department of Corrections was the largest number. They had 707 million, but just over 600 million was related to a new prison. So the detail follows that for a couple of pages. And then the last 2 pages is basically just the RSAs related to the Capital Project Overview Committee and the Long Range Capital Planning and Utilization Committee. And I only put them there because some of you may be appointed to that committee, and it just tells you how you got on there. You know, it's very specific that several Public Works members get appointed to the Capital Project Overview and to the Long Range Capital. So that is just taking you through that document rather quickly. If there's any questions, I'll take a pause here, but then I'll move on from there.
I just have one, and pardon me, I don't have it in front of me here. I know we have a CTE school. I guess my question is, do we have a backup CTE school in case they can't come up with their part of the funding? We've had it in the past.
So they only have the one listed in the capital budget recommendation.
Yeah, Jeffrey
I don't
Ridge.
know if there's, so let me back up. The Department of Education keeps a list of the CTEs and when they're due to be considered for a capital appropriation. I don't know what the status of the list is in terms of, you know, the entity after the one that's in this budget where they approached and where they can, you know, asked if they would be able to pass it locally if they had to. That would be a question I'd have to follow up with DOE on.
Do we know if Jeffrey Ringe has got, we don't know.
I don't know yet if there's been approval locally for that, or if it's just a placeholder with anticipation for approval. But I can ask the agency, I think they're due to see you next week.
Right.
I can ask them to be ready to respond to that when they come
Is
before you.
Commissioner Edelblut going to be here, or did he?
I don't believe he's going to
to.
come into that meeting. I believe it's going to be Melissa White, who's the
Okay.
director of one of the areas, and then Mr. Beard, who runs the CTE program.
I know that 2 bienniums we had that fall through twice.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Aside from that, I don't have any questions. Anyway, yes, Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for clarification, again, I'm new to this, so I wanted to make sure I understood what you were speaking about on the page 40 in regard to the Department of Education CTE renovation projects. You said that those projects were previously approved under this committee's budget before. Am I correct? But the governor has now taken these projects and put in her capital budget under the Education Trust Fund? I just need that clarification.
Yeah, no, so in developing the 2023 capital budget for 25 and 24 and 25 fiscal years, the CTE was in the proposed capital budget. During the process of building the operating budget, a decision was made to take them out of the capital budget and put it into the operating budget. There was 2 CTE projects last time. One was in the capital and one ended up in the House Bill 2. The decision was to just fund both projects through House Bill 2. So essentially they took cash out of the Education Trust Fund to pay for the CTE projects instead of bonding them.
Thank you very
But
much.
what this governor has proposed is to go back to what has been the norm, and is to bond a capital appropriation for a CTE.
Thank you for that clarification. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Jack.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Coming back to the page 43, where there's $1 billion something in requests, isn't that, am I remembering, we want the agencies to ask for everything they might possibly want and then prune from there? Because sometimes you will see the press saying, these big spenders want to spend $1 billion on what, but that's what we ask them to do.
So that's what the capital budget process does. It says agencies give us everything so that the governor can consider that. That's what this page 43 is. It's everything that the agencies thought that they might need at that time. Obviously, 6-8 months later, new ideas might come up or new issues may come up. And so you may have to pivot to address different capital issues. But it gives you a sense of what agencies might be asking for. They may not get them this cycle, but maybe a heads up as to what you might see for the next cycle as well.
Chris, so then our big thick book should have the 1.1 billion, just
It'll have less
close.
than that.
It'll have less, but it'll be close.
Takes the 1.1 billion of projects, and the governor and their team looked at and said, okay, here's projects we would consider for a capital budget.
Okay,
So it's going to be less than that.
and then it comes down, after that, then it comes down into our little pink book, which is what we'll be working off of. What this actually does, and it doesn't happen that frequently, but when we're in our, and I'm gonna call it the pink book for clarification for right now, we'll come up and the Department of Corrections will only have one item for something. But when we go to our binder, you'll find out that the Department of Corrections will have 4 or 5 different requests. And frequently, occasionally, they'll come in and say, look, the governor approved this $2 million for this project. We have 3 other smaller projects that add up to 2 million. We'd like to change that right now. That's the purview of this committee. We can go ahead and do that. That's why we get both books with us. So,
And just for clarification, when the agencies came to the governor, they asked for $1.1 billion worth of projects. The catalog has just over $400 million in general fund projects. So you can see it's been whittled down. And then what ended up in here is $143 million worth of capital projects.
thank you for that. Matter of fact, I just labeled this as my catalog, so I don't forget what to call it. This is the catalog. This is still the pink one. End of story.
So the white document is the bond offering statement from last April. And I just wanted members to have that. It's broken into 2 parts. It's part 1 and part 2. So part 1 would be dealing with the bond and explaining what the state's trying to do there. Part 2 is the demographic statistical information. That's the more, in my opinion, I don't know if the treasurer is behind me yet, but that's the more interesting part of it. And if you get to the second part, I mean, you're going to find information on demographics, you're going to find county information, you're going to find just a wealth of information in there, including talking about the previous capital budget and some of the items related to that. But I think it's a great resource. I just wanted to make the committee aware of it. So that's what I had there. Other than that, there's not a lot I have to say. Just a couple of quick things. Cannon Mountain, there was a appropriation for the tramway last operating budget of $18 million. You're going to see in this pink document, there's a $20 million request for the tramway at Cannon Mountain. The Governor Ayotte is recommending to close out the $18 million that was appropriated to Department of Natural and Cultural Resources for the tramway, so that money can be used to help balance the budget, and then has put it in here for $20 million. For those of you that have been around, you've heard the department mention within the last year that when they went out to bid, it was closer to $33 million to do the tramway. They were going to be looking at the structural arms that hold the tramway and having some engineers come in to make sure that those were sound, because I think the $33 or $32 million potential cost was including taking those all down. And the company that would provide the tram didn't want to rely on the fact that these might be old and could break if they put their new equipment on it. But that would be a question when they come before you to really understand what's going on with the tramway and what's $20 million going to buy. And you got rid of the 18. So I just wanted to make the committee aware of that.
Would you also walk the committee through, that came up back in the long-range capital planning, the status of the prison, the $40 million? why we don't see anything in there.
So right now, there's a $50 million appropriated to the Department of Corrections to look at a new prison. They're using those funds to assess the land behind the current prison to see if they can put the men's prison there. Right now, they have the women's prison that was put there most recently. There's a lot of ledge and a lot of other things that go on, and so they wanted to take a look at that land, make sure it could support a new men's prison, as well as use the balance of the funds to do the structural and architectural designs that they could use to go out to bid with. So the question had come up at a previous meeting is, why isn't there anything in the capital budget proposal for the prisons, a new prison? I think, and I suggest this, and will need to be followed up with Commissioner Hanks when she comes before you, but I think they may not need the money in the next 2 years because of the work they're doing to get ready to put something out to bid. It may be needed at a later point. Also, last spring, the treasurer came before you and talked about you may want to consider this project differently than you do other capital projects. It may not be something you put in House Bill 25, but maybe there's a separate legislative special that puts the appropriation for the new prison, but maybe staggers the appropriation out to kind of go along with what the need might be for the build, so that you don't appropriate $400 million all at once. Maybe you do something slightly less in the first couple of years, and then depending on how long the project takes. But so there's some different ways of looking at this, and I don't want to suggest that this is the only way, but that was kind of a conversation that was had with this committee that because it is such a large project, it may need to be looked at a little bit differently when it does come time to fully appropriate it.
I believe the commitment to the prison was $40 million a year for 10 years. And we've given them 40, actually 50 so far.
50.
So when I talked to Ken Weiler at Finance, he said, well, we made that commitment for 10 years, but we didn't necessarily mean that it was going to be 10 years in a row. So, so that's why this year you're not going to see 40 million in there for the prison. But the commitment is still there. Anything else? Any questions for Mr. Shea?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
Question to Mr.
Representative
Shea.
Cloutier.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question, do you have any idea, has the Department of Corrections told you or given you any hint about when the design work for the new men's prison would be done?
No, I haven't had any direct conversations related to that. And again, that would be under your purview when they come in. That they definitely would. I would suggest to the committee that you ask them questions about what's going on with the prison, the potential for a new prison, particularly as you consider what types of projects they're asking for in the capital budget and what they might need in the short term to allow the men's prison to continue to operate in a way that's safe and productive for the officers and the inmates. Yes, I don't have anything in particular, Representative Cloutier.
Thank you, Mr. Shea. Thank you.
And just one last comment, and as I indicated, my contact information is on that document. Feel free to email me, call me. If you can't find something or if you have a question, reach out. That's part of my charge, is to help you get the information you need so that you can make the decisions you have to make in this committee.
Representative Kaczynski.
Yeah, as a reminder, I think that 50 million for the corrections also included some interest of about 27 million.
Representative Boger.
Yeah, if I could, thank you for allowing my question, and thank you for taking my question. It goes back to the tramway, where we had 16 million allocated, I guess, through a bond for that project, and now we want to move that.
It was a cash appropriation. So there was cash being appropriated towards that project of $18 million. The governor has decided that in order to make the budget work, she needs that cash in 2026. So there's language potentially in House Bill 2 or the trailer bill that will basically lapse the remaining amount to the general fund. And then in the capital budget, the recommendation is to provide $20 million for the tramway.
Thank you.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Shea. Madam Treasurer, you are up next. And before that, I'd like to just say the reason we have the treasurer here all the time is there's lots of bonding money to be done here. As a general rule, we look to the treasurer to get us a figure that we can adhere to. Whatever that figure is, as a guideline, this committee has normally tried to cut it by about $10 million as a general rule. We do that only because after we pass this budget and it goes to the Senate, the reason 24 senators got voted in instead of 400 representatives is those 24 senators have made many promises to their areas. And they're going to add about 10 million to it, which is why they'll pass their version of the budget. And then we'll finally bang it out in a committee of conference. But it all starts with Madam Treasurer, who will give us a figure. And I noticed the governor's figure is at around 143 million. And in past, I would guess for the past 4 to 6 years, we've been working between 120 and 130. So Madam Treasurer, you're on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. For the record, State Treasurer Monica Misapelli, and thank you again for inviting me today. So I know you have a difficult task to try to fund capital projects, and as we usually know, there are a lot of requests that come before the governor and to you. But what I would like to just provide you an overview of, obviously some of most of the projects are bonded. What I would like to share is how we see things, from the perspective of the Treasury when we are ready to issue bonds to fund those projects. I'll try to say it at a high level, but this presentation has essentially what we look at, our debt affordability. So I'll start with why we look at our debt affordability, and is primarily because the borrowing costs are driven by the credit rating that rating agencies assign to the state. So they look at a variety of elements of components of the state of New Hampshire. So the economy, they look at the financial condition of our state, our operating results, and as part of that, obviously they want to review how, if we're able to issue a balanced budget, or the type of revenues that we have, are they diverse? In case one of them doesn't perform well, they want to make sure there's a variety of revenue sources that we can rely on. The amount of reserves we have, how much money we have in the rainy day fund, budgetary pressures, how much we approve during budgets or operating budgets, the cost of Medicaid, post-employment benefits, retirement plans, and of course, our debt burden. And so that's what we review at the Treasury. We're responsible for making sure that the state maintains those prudent debt management policies, so to continue with that. So as you all know, the state was upgraded last year because we've had a very good financial situation over the last few years, with revenue performing well, maintaining our debt burden manageable. So all of those pieces came together, and one of the rating agencies upgraded us. So that was great news. So now the reality is, we're facing a budget year that is changing the elements that helped us. So we still, one of the things that I always say, our debt, we can't really control our revenues, but we can manage our debt. So we look at our debt affordability in two ways. We prepared a debt affordability study, and that study calculates debt ratios that allow us to see how we're doing currently, and how we're projected to over the next few years, how those ratios look like. So on page 3 is just the definitions. I try to describe what we do. We have a debt affordability study we prepare every year, and also the statute RSA 6C require us to calculate how much more the legislature can approve without going to a limit, so without passing the limit. And the limit is 10% of unrestricted revenue of the previous fiscal year. So the law says the legislature cannot approve more debt than if it's more than 10% of the existing debt plus projected debt, meaning already everything that has been already authorized. So on page 4, I'm just the typical ratios that we look at is debt to revenue ratio. That's the key one that rating agencies review. And as you can see, this is the rate, how the ratio has performed over the years. And we obviously that has improved significantly over the last 10 years. So in 2015, it was 8.2%. In 2024, that ratio is 3.8%. So we look at that number when we calculate those debt ratios. We want to be really low, because not only we want to compare to the median and how other states rated the same way we're rated. Again, 3.8% is really an excellent number, and we never want to get too close to 10%. 10% will probably will equal a downgrade. So on page 5 is just a picture how our debt has changed over time. Is this graph shows how much debt we had in 2006. It increased during the financial crisis. The state issued additional bond, and I think there was a restructuring of debt and different. There were different measures that were taken during that time. But again, since then we have improved significantly in our general fund debt and other debt that we issue for Fish and Game and others. All of them are decreasing. So that's a really good picture here. Page 6 is just, again, there's a lot of numbers here, but I just want to focus on, these are the ratios we calculate, and I believe I shared already the debt affordability study with you, and otherwise, other than that, I'll be happy to share it with all of you as posted on our website. But we calculate, again, the different ratios and different debt metrics, and we compare those to how, for example, these are, in this graph, we're showing the medians according to Moody's. And the last one, the one that says debt service to general fund revenues, that median is actually published by S&P Global, and that median is for states that are rated similar to us, so AA plus rated states. So in 2024, it shows the actual ratios. Those ratios, again, are really healthy ratios. Debt per capita, debt to revenue ratio, compared to the medians, are really excellent numbers. So all of these calculations are based on some assumptions that we have to make. So, for example, we estimate, or we assume that the state is going to stay within that 120 million per biennium. So we calculate that every year is going to be, we're going to issue 60 million. And in this particular case, we assume no revenue growth. So revenues staying flat over the next few years. This study that we prepare, we calculate different scenarios. Is a way of a stress test that we do for to see how our debt is going to perform compared to the median and compared to how the state, the rating agencies will see the state. We're getting ready to issue bonds again. In about 2 weeks, we'll have meetings with rating agencies that have an opportunity to review us again. So showing a picture like this with these ratios is really a positive, a credit positive for us. And so 2025 through 28, in this table, again, it's based on issuing 60 million each year. And in 2025, we assume that we're going to issue the 40 million that you folks were talking about related to the prison. So that's And so in 2025, we were assuming we're going to issue 100 million of bonds. I know there was a question earlier about the status of the prison. We don't typically interact with the state agencies as to how they're doing with their expenditures because we're assumed it's typically about the same amount that they spend. And when they incur those expenditures, that's when we issue our bonds. But we learned that the prison wasn't ready to spend the 40 million, so we are not going to bond the 40 million in this year the way we had anticipated. So at this point, we're just assuming we're going to issue those bonds in 2026. Again, so we make assumptions and we calculate ratios, and again, based on those assumptions, we prepare our recommendations. So we typically stay, or what I will say to you is the base case is 120 million for the biennium funded with general funds. And the reason for that, as you can see, we were working towards reducing our ratio to a point that is comparable to the median. So at this point in 2024, we are there. When we're going to start issuing additional bond, again, staying within the 60 million per fiscal year, and then we add the 40 million that was already approved, then our ratios start increasing already. So this is a fact. There's really nothing new. So we already have, that bonding has been authorized. So we're going to assume that's going to be spent. And so those ratios are going to start to increase. We don't know how revenues are going to perform, but this is when things, the ability to, when we say we want to stay within the 120, 130 million, is because of this reason. And that's the way we see it. And of course, it doesn't answer the questions that you all may have and the agencies, right? It doesn't provide what agencies want to hear. But this is the way we see it. It's just we want to maintain a debt. The debt levels are manageable in a way that they can continue to afford that. And of course, any additional debt that this committee and the legislature approves is additional debt service that needs to be paid with operating funds. So that's the debt affordability picture that, in general, we look at. On page 7.
That's Representative Brown.
Thank you. Just a quick question. In the previous page, you talked about the $40 million for the prison being deferred to 2026. Does this chart show that change, this RSA 6C chart? Is that reflected in this chart, the following chart?
Well, so I'll talk about this chart. So
Okay.
this chart is according to the law, we need to calculate the debt limit, but we have to include everything that has been any outstanding debt, so debt service already that we were paying, existing debt service, and also anything that has, so we have to project debt service for everything that has been authorized and unissued. So to answer your question, it includes everything, not only the 40 million, it includes, so the way this chart is, and this is just an attempt to try to respond to the law, right? So there may be other ways to calculate this limit, but the second column from left to right, it shows everything that has been authorized and issued. So right now is 374.4 million that has been authorized and issued. The first column shows actual debt service. And then we also have to include all the debt that the state has guaranteed. So this is that the state is, if there's a need to step in and pay for that debt, is everything. So anything that has been authorized for the Business Finance Authority, Peace Development Authority, they have some authorizations, and the state guarantees their debt. So all of that needs to be included in this calculation. So it's everything that the state has promised, and so the law says no more than 10% can be authorized if the existing and projected debt is going to be more. So when we finished all these calculations, it correlates to another $1 billion in bonding authorization. I'm never gonna suggest that you do that. But I guess bottom line is this law provides for a limit, which is different than the federal government. The state law provides a limit, but it's a generous limit, I guess I will say, because we never want to get to that 10%. We always want to maintain it. Again, as I showed you before, in a manageable way. We want to stay within those medians, and so we can maintain that credit rate, and that allows us to keep the borrowing cost low. And so, so this is a calculation we have to provide it. We provide this to the legislative budget assistant every year, and again, this is required by law.
Thank you.
So on page 8 is just just a summary of again a few points that key takeaways. So clearly, the state has capacity to borrow more. There's no doubt, and even if revenues, if revenues continue to, not perform according to how we want them to perform, the state will still has the ability to borrow more. But again, any additional bonding authorization that we have to again go out and issue bonds, that will increase obviously the debt service and the state's ability to pay that debt. Right, as I mentioned earlier, that we can manage our debt obligations, but revenues is what's a little more difficult to anticipate. And the one point I just want to mention, and it just is a reminder of sometimes I see projects and I don't fully know the useful lives of some of those projects, but a reminder that we issue bonds for 20 years, we amortize that debt for over 20 years. So anything that their useful life of those projects is less than that number, I guess I would just recommend that you review that and you make a decision accordingly. But at least, keep that in mind that we're borrowing for a period of 20 years, and if there is no need to include certain equipment that doesn't live that long, doesn't last that long, is for you to consider. So that's what I had for prepared remarks. I'll be happy to answer any additional questions.
I will ask the first question, which is, once again, I heard you say the magic 120 million. I know you're very comfortable with that. I know last year you were very comfortable because we threw out 130 million. How comfortable are you with 143 million right now?
I was actually not fully aware that was going to be the number. I was hearing the 130 million. So I think it's a decision. 140 million seems, again, if we can, as you mentioned, I'm not sure what the Senate will do, or so if we start changing our math, I just showed you the math. Mm-hmm. If we start changing the math, then that's how we're, it'll get. Again, we perhaps need to find a more number that we want to work with, and I always hear. The cost of projects have increased, inflation and all of that, and I fully recognize that. But my job is to calculate those numbers to stay within those numbers, right? So I would say 140 seems a bit high in my opinion, but it's not, again, the state can afford that. It's really, if the state wants to stay within 140, I will say 130 is a little better.
Once again, we never want to hold you to any of this. This is just for our
Yes.
internal use working here. Would 135 be an equitable number?
That sounds reasonable to me. I guess I'll find a compromise number,
See,
right?
This gives us a place that we can start as a committee and saying we're comfortable with it, because quite frankly, even looking at the intelligence of this committee, I don't think anybody understood what you said on those first 8 pages. That's why we always, baloney. Please don't give me that. Anyway, that's why the chair always is tasked with asking this dollar figure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I tried to explain it in a way that I feel like you'll be able to understand it. But essentially, it's really we
never
we
do.
crunch
You
the
know.
numbers to try to show you that currently we're doing really well. The state is doing really well. The debt management practices of the state of the last few years has paid off, and so stay within those boundaries will be prudent. But again, I know you have the difficult task to approve capital projects, but I think. Again, staying within those numbers, finding a good balance there, I think that should be appropriate.
Thank you. Representative Bogert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for taking my questions. I actually have two questions, if that's okay. The first one's on page 6, going back to the net debt service to general fund revenues. Is those percentages cumulative? When it's like for 25, it says 4.4%. Is that a cumulative of all of our debt? And so that when we're at that 10% mark that you were talking about, we're only using total 4.4% approximately to that 10%.
That's correct. That's total. It's cumulative. So it's total debt. This number does not include on page 6. This number does not include debt guaranteed by the state, but we do in the study. We prepared another chart that shows that. And so when we include, assuming, which will be very unlikely, but assuming the state were to pay all that debt that has been guaranteed, the number increases by 100 basis points. So another 1%. So even with that, even if the state were to pay everything, the number's still manageable.
Okay.
Follow-up?
And the follow-up, please. Thank you. And you mentioned the 60 million per year, so that's 120. And then you said you were going to fast forward over to 26, 40 million. So for the 26, we have to look at 160 million. Is that what I understood? That would be possibly bonded?
Yeah, so in 26, it will be 100 million because it will be the 40 million plus the 60. But again, if this committee of, the final product of the capital budget is more than that, then we'll just add another 5 or 10 million, the amount that you're going to
One
approve.
last follow-up, please.
Follow-up.
So, thank you. So if we're looking for that 100 million already for 26, does that, the question previously asked was about that 135 million for the biennial, or for the 2 years. So that number's already going to be skewed?
No,
Bec-
this is cumulative. You're talking
Yes.
about. She's giving you cumulative numbers that are coming up, not 100.
Well, I was talking about the 160 or the 100 million for 26 is already, that would be the 60 that we would have capital budget room for, plus the 40 for the prison. That's 100 million already.
Yes, but it's all included in here. So again, the anomaly here was the 40 million. But the math again is 60 to 70 million for each year of the biennium. That's what you get. And the only anomaly will be adding 40 million whenever we issue that. So we're not going to issue in 25, but we're going to issue in 26. So it will reflect. It will just the ratio will start increasing then rather than. So for example, 25 may stay around the 4%. But then going forward, it will increase again, just because of we will bond that additional 40 million, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Representative Jack.
Thank you. Isn't the 40 million was authorized but unissued in a prior term, so it's already counted in there?
Correct.
Yeah.
That's what we're including in the math.
Representative Faulkner.
Thank you. I think we're trying to get this math turned out right, but we issue new debt service, $60 million a year, but we are also paying off some of the debt that's out there. So that the net increase is not 60 million, it's something less than that. Is that correct?
And the 60 million is just the assumption, but you're correct. So this calculation includes those new issues what we're paying off. And what happens too is we don't always issue the exact 60 million, right? We issue bonds based on how soon the agencies spend that money. So if they haven't spent the money, like in the case of the prison, we're not going to issue bonds. We're going to wait until they're ready to spend those funds. So there are times that we issue less than 60, but again, it's just less or more. So again, it's just on average. That's what we typically talk about, and this is all paid with general funds.
Representative Vaughn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question. So we currently owe 525 million in bonds
That is correct, and that's
on page 6.
that is correct, and that is just what we call net tax supported debt, so pay with general funds.
Follow up.
How much is left on the school building aid? Because I used to be on education. I've been following this for years and years,
So it's actually let me get that number.
which shouldn't have been there anyway.
So just to answer your previous question, so we actually owe less for general fund. It's about 400 million right now, but school building aid is we have about $30 million left outstanding, and that we're going to pay that off in 2029.
Okay.
It's
That
coming up.
cuts down on the amount of building aid. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you, Madam Treasurer. It's been very, very, very enlightening, and I think we've got our little old magic number to work with here.
My pleasure, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This committee, I think we're not scheduled now to meet till March 4th, a Tuesday. And we'll be hitting the ground running at 10 a.m. I think we're scheduled through till 3 in the afternoon. We've done things a little bit differently this year. We used to schedule them in half hour, 45 minutes, an hour, depends. And on Mr. Shea's suggestion, we've lumped them all together so that we won't have any, we'll take our own little breaks in between as necessary, but we won't have any of the dead periods in between. You know, if we allocated somebody for an hour and they took 20 minutes, we would have to sit here for 40 minutes twiddling our thumbs. So instead, we're going to be able to just take them in a row and get them done as quickly as we can and utilize our time efficiently. Mr. Shea, anything to wrap us up?
So near the end of the week, I'll shoot an email to everybody that will have the loose schedule for the agencies for next Tuesday. So as the chair has indicated in the calendar, it will show at 10 o'clock you're starting. It'll show the agencies in the order that they're going to present. So it'll be Department of Administrative Services, DOIT, Governor's Office in the morning. What I'll send you is, I've asked the agencies, you have an hour, Administrative Services, 60 minutes. DOIT, you have a half hour. Governor's Office, you have a half hour. So I'll give you that schedule just so you kind of see how long an agency should be taking. But the whole point was, if you have an agency who's scheduled for an hour and they take 30 minutes, you can go right into the next agency and keep moving.
Representative Faulkner.
Are they able to stand by in their offices? I don't hate to have all these people waiting here.
Well, that was the reason for what I would say behind the scenes schedule, where I said, plan on speaking for 60 minutes, plan on speaking for 30 minutes. The hope is that the agencies that are next in line will pay attention and know to be here if they think that agency's not going to take the full amount of time. If I'm made aware beforehand, I will also let the agencies know. So if just say Department of Administrative Services came in and said, we're going to be done in like 10 minutes. Well, I would let DOIT know to please come in or schedule another agency in addition to. But yeah, at this point, you got 2 days of hearings scheduled that should cover all the agencies. Unless there's an agency or two that you need to bring back, and then we would have to schedule another day to do that. And then there'll be the usual lapse extension meeting that will be potentially March 14th is the tentative date we've been telling the agencies. We're doing it a little bit differently this time, and then I've asked the agencies to report on their lapse extensions as part of the presentation to the full committee. I noted in the last couple cycles that sometimes members who aren't part of that committee or the subcommittee felt like they didn't know why some of the decisions were made as it related to the lapse extension. So this gives everybody the same information. And then at a later point, though, the chair will have a subcommittee work on finalizing the lapse extensions. And lapse extensions for new members are basically capital projects that the agencies would like to have continue. Without this lapse extension, they would truly lapse at the end of the biennium. The authority to spend the money would go away. So agencies that, for example, with the $40 million for the prison, they'll need an extension to make sure that money doesn't lapse. And it's at the back pages of that pink document that I gave you, there's probably 150 items that agencies have asked to not lapse for various reasons. And this committee goes through that pretty intently to make sure that their items that are there should be there. Items that didn't make the list that should be are added. And then if there's any available funds remaining, this committee has in the past tried to repurpose those funds to projects that you would like to have money go to. But it's all dependent on how much is available through the lapse extension process. And that's never known truly until we get done that process. But that's all I got.
Anybody, any further questions, comments? Representative Cludier?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So right, next week, we are only going to meet on Tuesday, the 4th. Is that correct?
Correct,
And then it won't be until the following week we will continue. Is that
correct.
And your intention is to go on Tuesdays, because I noticed the following week is town meeting day. I don't know if we're going to come in and meet, right?
Monday, March 10th.
Some reps, I don't know. I don't care. I'm in, but I just.
So next week, we've got agencies coming in on Tuesday. The following week, it's the Monday because there was consideration given for town meeting concerns.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anything else? 11:30. We're out of here. Adjourned.